It's time again for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good afternoon, all. Al, I think that everybody in Maryland is curious about what will happen with Larry Hogan after he leaves office in January. There's a lot of speculation out there. I think that one thing is so notable is how he was able to be so successful in a historically blue state as governor for 2 terms, and has been mentioned a lot as a possible 2024 candidate. Is there a pathway for somebody like that in the Republican Party?
Well, first of all, I have to issue this caveat. I'm not experienced in the Republican primary process. But to be honest with you, I don't really see much of a path or much hope for Governor Hogan becoming the Republican nominee in the party as it is today, whether or not Donald Trump remains a candidate. Let me suggest 2 big obstacles. The Republican Party has always been a more politically homogenous party than the Democratic Party. I think in the latest Gallup numbers, it's about 75% conservative. And after 6 or 7 years of Trump leading the party, more and more Hogan-type Republicans are sort of opting out of GOP primary politics. So it leaves the primaries even more tilted to the hard right conservatives than before. The second thing, and Craig may want to talk about this a little bit, he probably knows a lot more about it, but the Trump deal people have done a really good job of doing something that at least I know Obama and Clinton, and I sort of believe that Bush's didn't do, which is taking control of state parties. And what that means is that the party officials who run the primary system are probably not going to be particularly favorable to an anti-Trump candidate like Larry Hogan. I mean, you think about all the Republicans, normal Republicans that the state parties have censored, Liz Cheney being the primary example. That's because they're run by people who are on the far extreme. Given that, I don't really, a party being like that, I don't really see a big path for Hogan. We started, when we started in 1990-91 for Clinton in sort of the pre-campaign, we thought we had a clear path that would lead us through the primaries and right through to the general election. And that was because at that time, about 2/3, actually a little even more of the party, rank and file, were moderates and conservatives. And so the liberals made all the noise, but the moderates and conservatives, if you could tap them, had the votes. And so we figured if we had an agenda that appealed broadly, we could not only tap that support in the primaries, but then not have to pivot, not have to veer back to the center, because we'd be right on that centrist path into the election. And Craig might want to comment on this, but it was a lot harder because of that for George Bush in 1992 to paint Clinton as an old traditional Democratic liberal, as he had done pretty successfully with Michael Dukakis 4 years earlier. Now, I might be wrong, but I don't see the Clinton path for Hogan. Clinton path in the Republican Party for Hogan. So what should Hogan want to be doing if he wants to be president? Here's what I think. I think, he certainly ought to get out and about and raise money, which he's already started to do. I think he's going to be in Annapolis tonight. But I believe it's much more important for him to spend most of the next 6 to 9 months really shaping an agenda, figuring out the appeal that he wants to make to Republicans and to a majority of Americans. And once he does that and knows what his message is going to be, the message he wants to deliver, he can make an assessment of whether there's a path for his kind of candidacy. But defining himself, I think, is really the most important thing he can do right now. We've seen many times in recent years candidates who seem to be very strong candidates just on their past resume, but not defining themselves for presidential races. I mean, you can think about Ted Kennedy against Jimmy Carter, couldn't answer the question, why I want to be president. Gary Hart had a little trouble answering where's the beef against Walter Mondale. And I think Vice President Harris, who looked very strong at the beginning of last campaign, I think we talked about it on Fromm and Fuller, wound up having a hard time figuring out exactly how she was going to run. Because you can let your campaign get ahead of your substance. And when you do, I think campaigns tend to falter. So, Hogan may not be able to change the Republican Party, and he may be able to find a path. But the one pitfall he can avoid is he can spend the next few months telling the American people exactly where he stands on the most important issues.
Greg, it's going to be very competitive in your party for 2024. A lot of conservatives, you would think that there would be room for a moderate to kind of take the leadership role. What's your thoughts?
Well, it's very early, and Al's analysis is, I think, on point. But I think I'd like to sort of see where things stand a year from now, and then look at Al's very good points. From my standpoint, I think Hogan should run. I think he should run for the country, because I think the country needs an able chief executive who can get things done on a bipartisan basis, and he's proven he can do that. I actually think he should run for Maryland because he can tell the story of what he's accomplished in Maryland, and the rest of the nation can understand, what's happened here. And it's actually not a bad model at all when you look at his achievements with a democratically led legislature and having to be so bipartisan. I think he should run for the Republican Party because I think his voice is one that needs to be heard by Republicans across the land. I don't know how many there are out there who agree with him, but I have a feeling it's a pretty good percentage. And I think the percentage that agree with somebody like Hogan is going to grow. It's not going to diminish. I think the percentage who are still beholden to Trump is going to shrink, and it'll shrink further in the weeks ahead. I also think he should do it for himself. He's been somebody who has embraced public service. He served at the highest level as a governor in this state. As Al knows, and I deeply believe, running for president is one of the most honorable things you can do. It first of all, it exposes you to people across the nation like nothing else. I was very proud to have been a part of Ronald Reagan's campaigns, very proud to have been a part of George Bush's campaigns. I'm very proud to have been a chairman of Pete Wilson's short-lived presidential campaign. And while we didn't succeed, it introduced Pete to the nation, and it showed him what the country was about, well beyond the borders of California. And it leaves one with an ability to perhaps serve on a cabinet if you're not successful in the election, perhaps do something else with a not-for-profit organization, but with a deep understanding of the country. So I hope that the assessment Governor Hogan is making is not just dependent on, is there a path? Honestly, there wasn't a path for Ronald Reagan, according to a lot of people who sit around Washington when he first started out. There wasn't a path for Bill Clinton. After the re-election of George Bush, a lot of people, including George Herbert Walker Bush, weren't sure there was a path for him. And so at this point in time, I think Al is quite right. I think you frame your message, you really get very clear on what you believe, why you want to be president, why you think you're the best able to hold that high office, and then go out and find out whether you have a constituency. But for all the reasons mentioned, I think it would be good for the country and good for him to go pursue this.
Yeah, Al, the other thing I wanted to bring to your attention, of course, we were talking about this last week, but 2022 has changed the Republican Party. The midterms elections show that the Trump model is not popular. It is not working. I guess we'll have another test in Georgia soon of that. But when you give a somewhat pessimistic view of Hogan's chances, are you factoring that in?
Well, you didn't ask me whether I thought he should run. You asked me whether I thought he could win. I think he should run. I've talked to some Republican friends uh, uh, who have had a lot of experience in national politics, who think it'll probably be a good thing if he ran. But as Craig said, running for president is really hard. And the conventional wisdom may not have been that there was, or the conventional wisdom may have thought Bill Clinton didn't have a path in 1992, but beginning in 1989, and particularly as the glow of the first Gulf War started to diminish, we saw a path for President Clinton. And we thought there was a path in the Democratic Party that would put him in a good position to go into a general election. But it's a path that most candidates were afraid to take, to be honest with you, because he was sort of challenging the orthodoxy of the people who were the loudest in the party. Larry Hogan will have to do that. I think it'd be fine if he did it, but I hope he does it by figuring out how he wants to do it, what he wants to run on first. The question of last week, I've really looked more at the numbers about what happened in this midterm. I had to do a presentation at Johns Hopkins on Monday night, and the results are a little more mixed than they appear. Now, what is clear is where the places where Trump is, dominated with his election denying candidates in important statewide elections in swing states, and particularly in positions that could control the election apparatus. It is true that by, generally pretty small margins, the people rejected the Trump candidates. But that was in the general election. And what Larry Hogan is going to have to deal with first is the Republican Party and the Republican primaries. And one of the reasons the Democrats had the success in the general election in those crucial races, even though, again, Republicans won more votes than Democrats in overall in the country. More Republicans voted than Democrats in the country, but in a lot of those swing states, which I think I went through in detail last week, independents were just absolutely critical, and they didn't like election deniers. So, for Larry Hogan, the question is whether, we know where the country is on that. We're not quite so sure where the Republican Party is. And, if Trump doesn't run, there are probably going to be a lot of mini Trumps trying to pick up that part of the party, and we'll see. It would be a great thing for the country if somebody like Larry Hogan could figure out a message that could penetrate into that party and create a broad enough base to take the nomination away from the next mini Trump.
Greg, you have the last word?
Well, I guess two questions that are in my mind as we have this discussion that I think Republicans have to ask themselves is can Larry Hogan govern? And he's proven he can do that. And then can Larry Hogan win in November of 2024? And I always have this sort of undying hope that Republicans will, wake up and decide it's a lot better to win than just to posture. It makes it tough getting through the primaries, but I think one of the changes in this year's election was that Republicans saw a path to winning. And I just don't think they're going to turn back and choose a candidate or candidates that don't offer a hope of winning the presidential election. Not holding the White House is something that everybody in public life, does not enjoy. They enjoy winning the White House, and I think the case can be made that Larry Hogan can both govern and he could win in a general election, and that sets him up pretty well to go explore this. And I indeed hope he doesn't.
Well, we have to leave it there. Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thank you very much indeed. We will see you next week.